Hi, this is Tony at Cover Magazine, and I'm speaking to Dane Richards, the CEO at JMR. Dane, once again, welcome and thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, morning, Tony. As usual, always a pleasure to chat to you, to be involved with the Tech Fest. Such a great, I guess, conference. And looking forward to this year's 2024 conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, JMR, again, a sponsor. Thank you so much for your assistance. It's, we can't make it work without sponsors because we don't charge the delegates. We invite everybody to come and join in. Dane, we're chatting a little bit this year at the conference. The theme is around agility, as you would know, and agility in business. And it might be a word that, has been thrown around a lot, etc. But there's a lot of important aspects to agility, and especially in today's environment where, you can wake up, it's almost like Cape Town weather, technology. You wake up and this is the important aspect, and a couple of days later you wake up and something else is now important, So things change fast and you have to be able to adapt. So just maybe putting two hats on at the same time on your side, the one as a tech company and the other one as a businessman. What does agility actually mean in business to you?
Yeah, and I guess the main thing to my mind is, and so like you said, there's multiple hats, and from an agility perspective, from us as a solutions provider in terms of an insurance platform, but also a data migration aspect, there's, I think, similarities, but also differences between the two, and subsetting that against the business as well. So maybe let me start at the top. So agility in a business sense, it's my take on it is it's your ability to take the fast flowing level of information and be able to then drive or change direction quickly. And you can see that certainly in the insurance industry, I think it's becoming a very prevalent aspect of the industry now, more so in the past. Insurance has always been a traditionally, this is the way it gets done. It's a tried and tested model. But now you have, and I think it's been something that's touched on many times in the past over the last years in the conference. Now you see these new players coming to the game where they have a new way of doing insurance, for example, a new way of calculating, premiums or the ways of doing your underwriting that is agile in its sense. And I think what have brought success, I think, to these companies coming out of I guess, the industry is really just their adaptability of the market, right? And that flows is you have to try something quickly. If it doesn't work, you can pivot and move on to the correct direction. And where that translates to my mind is from a platform perspective and coupled with data, the only way an industry or an organization can be agile is really having a grasp and understanding of the data metrics that comes out of that process. So to my mind, it's really a long way of saying in order to make decisions quickly, you have to have as much of information available to you in order to make a good decision. And that's why when we talk agility, it's also coupled with the sense is how close to an information set are you?
Absolutely. I think you touched on something that's quite important that we sometimes not, almost unspoken think of, but we don't really articulate and work it. How would it work in the future is changing direction. It's one thing to have a linear line of growth and you're going to expand here and you're going to increase product availability here and you can enhance the product there. But what if you need to suddenly change direction because what you're busy with, the sort of landscape has changed completely? How do you prepare your data and the data that you have for that sort of eventuality in the future?
Yeah, and it sounds like an easy question, and off the face of it, it is easy, but the complexities behind it make it, I guess, a difficult one. I think that the main aspect is you need to understand where your data sits. The closer one is aware of what you're storing, what information is available, then brings you into a place where you know what information is available to you. That the challenges of that, certainly for large organizations, is they've spent years gathering, vast quantities of data. And certainly from a business practice perspective, once one starts gathering data and that you get to a point where you're like, this is the data, we understand it becomes a source of truth. So one doesn't touch or tweak and play around with the current data sets one has, because it's almost like if it's not broken, don't touch it aspect. And that's, I think, for me, a concept where when we're talking agility is, I think organizations shouldn't be, I guess, afraid to adjust and sort of play around with the data sets they're gathering. More so than not, I think a lot of organizations as well, now we're coupled in a space where there's a lot of I guess, regulatory requirements in terms of your data sets as well. So a lot of organizations today are going through processes where you need to dive into your data and understand, well, what are we collecting in terms of individuals and that, because there's important compliance requirements and that may become available to that. It's an opportune place to now you go in and will like ask the questions are the data we're gathering, is it necessary? Is it legislatively correct for GDPR and POPIA and that? But out of that outcome, one can then make sort of decisions as to, the information that we are gathering. Is it for future-based decisions or directions, and make a conscious choice? Because in some senses, one says, well, just collect everything. You have to ask your question, well, what is the purpose? It's gathering this, but at that point in time, to become agile and not to overburden yourself with data is, I think a lot of business should be asking, well, now that we're collecting data, what is a purpose for this data?
Yes, I think it's sort of wise words that you spoke, because innovation shouldn't just start with a great idea that you get to see whether you've got the data to back it up. It should also start with, what data have I got, and what does this mean in terms of my future?
Yeah. Some ways as well, it could also not just be the data one has at this stage is an important portion of it, but the other side of that as well, which is no less important, is, well, what data are we going to be collecting in future? So as an organization, say you're bringing in a new product set and one wants to agilely move within the market to make it a successful product. Well, whilst you're building a product, one would then want to define the critical aspects of what you want to measure with this particular product, right? It sounds very straightforward off the basis of it, but you need to put these lines of thought into whatever software solution and sort of infrastructure one's building when you're launching a new product, is putting it out. Do you have all the mechanisms in place to track whatever metrics would indicate a successful or an unsuccessful interaction with a new product, for example? So I guess, long story short, it's your data that you have already to drive maybe a potential new product to market, but also as that product comes on board, are you collecting all the metrics required to be able then to pivot quickly in terms of driving that product in the right direction?
Yes, yeah, no. I mean, some of the things that come to mind is, I remember people, especially when you look at the lower end of the market, address and where to find a person was quite a difficult thing a decade or two ago. And with cell phones and the technology linked to that, sort of pinpointing where the person is, etc., changed that concept of knowing where the person is completely. And if you had been collecting cell phone numbers at that point, you were in the pound seats. If you hadn't, you were left behind. And a lot of people in that sector of the market were left behind because they never collected cell phone numbers. They thought, oh, it's not important, we don't market that way, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a very good example of, I guess, the challenges or the weigh-ins of what data you collect. Like, in the sense, you know, collecting cell phone numbers, even though one didn't require it prior in your instance, it now sets you up for you know, a good prank. But the opposite of that could be true as well. Let's say, for example, one had an insurance product where maybe you only had two key metrics that, you know, you would use to underwrite a particular product. For example, you needed a date of birth, for example, and maybe an indicator in terms of their health, you know, their health status, for example. Then from a product perspective, you have to balance, well, what sort of questions does one need to gather and collect in the interim to bring on business, versus asking too many questions, which may sort of alienate a customer. And you see a lot of organizing, you know, there's this quick quote aspect. So you provide all the information that enables you to then gather a price. And then if someone's on board, you then go through a process of gathering that information. But it's certainly in these day and ages, I think a lot of individuals and companies can ask the question, well, it's one thing that one gathered a set of information prior to their digital journey, but once you're fully digital, and that, does one need the same sort of information or gathered in the same way? Is an interesting thought to propose. Is, you know, you may not need an address, for example, for a postal address, because simply no communication is going to end up in a traditional letter, for example.
No, I mean, it's the sort of almost opportunities and ideas are endless as we go ahead, you know. And I suppose, as we started off the conversation, the secret is to have an agile approach to how you do things.
Yeah, exactly. And that in the end of the day, to my mind, is when we talk agile, it's organizations shouldn't be afraid to try things differently, I guess, or be opposed to heading down a different direction. Certainly as well is it's something the industry, specifically like large organizations that have high volume, high traffic websites, there's a concept called A/B testing, where, you know, you bring out a specific product set and you put it in tandem with your current proposal or product set, and have the ability, then you make changes, test it with a small audience, measure and dictate the results of that, and if it's positive, then you roll it out across the board. So when one says agile, it's, you also have the sense that even though you're making fast and, you know, quick changes, it doesn't need to be exposed to your entire business process or sort of customer base. One can then make changes quickly, test it with small sets, and out of that outcome know then, you know, either it's something you'll push out to the main audience or not.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think that those are some of the things that we will discuss at the Tech Fest coming up, you know, with some of the guys who have built new businesses and startups, and some who's gone a couple of years in the journey to see how it works. So yeah, I look forward to that, and I look forward to your participation. Dane, thank you once again for being willing to chat to me.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, and looking very forward to our panel discussion. I think it's going to be very interesting as always. And yeah, I always, every time I attend, there's one or two golden nuggets that come out that I thought, oh, this is, you know, there's one or two things, and I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Well, Dane, thanks a lot. And yeah, good luck with your preparation as well.
Thank you, Tony. Have a good afternoon.
You too, man. Cheers.